So I read Berserk's Lost Chapter, right? I read the chapter that is not in any of the volumes, not even the deluxe editions, and I have some opinions on it. And that's what we're really here for, is my opinions and what I want. So the chapter takes place during the eclipse while little Griffith is in his little egg and he's being reborn and Guts is tweaking out and all that fun stuff that happens. And I can see why this comic was pulled, because why do I keep calling it a comic? I can see why this issue was pulled, because I can see the story becoming less special because for those of you who haven't read it, spoilers, but Griffith goes and meets God, which is kind of a big deal to have a character meet God and to have so much of a story have a rigid explanation instead of it being vague, especially because most of Berserk is so vague that it leaves a lot open to the imagination. Like on the Berserk Reddit, I read that like they're in Europe, like real life Europe, and I hate that. I fucking hate that. I understand the influences, especially with the Holy See and like all that shit, but I hate picturing the Berserk world as Europe and not just Europe inspired with Indian inspired and Italy inspired places. I hate it. I don't like thinking about it. And so I can see why they would pull this comic, because it has the same sort of thing where it explains too much of the world. I mean, he literally meets God. But I actually like this more than I like the idea of it being in physical Europe, because one, it explains in the comic that humans created God, and God is really just a reflection of their will, of man's will and man's desires and man's hate and man's sadness and despair and all that. And so even though it is in the comic a physical thing that Griffith goes and sees and it talks, it isn't really real. It's like part of it, even in the comic explains that part of this God is in Griffith, and Griffith's desires shape this God. So it's really just a physical and visual metaphor for human will anyway. And I know it's a little more than that, but that's how I read it. And I honestly like that. I like the idea, especially in art and also in real life, that like humans create their own gods, humans create their own despair, humans shape their own lives. And so I think it works really well on that level. But on the other hand, I do see how people could read it more literally, and then that would take away from the comic, especially because where it's placed in the comic is mid-eclipse, and we're following Guts that whole time. And so it's very weird to go from Guts' perspective during the most traumatic thing anyone could ever go through, basically, to then cut to Griffith being his little egg and his little egg going down to meet God. I can see pacing wise why that wouldn't work, especially because I reread all of Golden Age arc up to the eclipse recently, and then I've read that, and then I read that where it was supposed to be. Then I went back to reading the eclipse, and now I've just gone back and reread it again just for this video. And I can see why it doesn't work there. I think it could work as a standalone or a flashback, which I think, so if you've already read Berserk, but you haven't read this, you should, because I think it fits way better like that. But I get why it's not there. I get why it was pulled. And then, of course, there is, which apparently this is an infamous line from what I've seen from other people talking about Berserk, but Griffith's "I want wings" line, where he gets to, the God basically tells him he can shape things how he wants, because part of God part of God is in him, and his desires are the God's desires, blah, blah, blah. And so he says, well, in that case, I want wings. And it's kind of, I think it fits, and I love the line, actually. So you have Griffith, who is both a very serious and cunning and deceitful character, who also has these, hey, I'm just a little femboy moments. And so I think this is the last time that we ever really see that, is Griffith being like, has this one childish, like, infant like desire where he's like, hey, well, if I can do whatever I want wings. Like, I want to fly. It comes across as so childish, but it's also, the way I read it anyway, it's kind of powerful that he's just like, he goes down and meets God after everything that's happened to him. And he's just like, oh, so you're God and I'm part of God and everyone's part of God. And God isn't really a real thing. And I get to shape what God is. And so, well, I want fucking wings. Like, it's so powerful. And there's so many chances to put funny PNGs up when he says he wants wings. I'll have some fun in Photoshop later. But I think reading it seriously, it works incredibly. I think it works really well. I just think it wasn't placed in a good spot. And so those are my thoughts on it basically. But yeah, I think it's definitely worth reading. It's definitely worth checking out. I think if you're reading the comics for the first time, why do I keep calling it a comic? People are going to get mad at me for calling it a comic. If you're reading the manga for the first time, I recommend waiting until you get to Lost Children and then maybe going back, or even waiting until the Conviction arc. And then after the Conviction arc, I think it'd be a good time to go back and read that. Of course, do what you want. Yeah, but you're not going to find anything official for what's it called? For Chapter 83. There's no actual official way to read it, I think. You're going to have to go on the internet, and it's literally one Google search, so it shouldn't be hard. But I think it's an interesting chapter. I get why it was pulled. I really like it, but I understand. And I'm hungry now, and I want wings. Thank you for watching.